That's great. Love Austin. Love what God's doing in our church. Welcome. My name's Jason. Today we've kind of transition series. We were in a 4-week series on depth, and we're walking through the book of Colossians. And now we're moving into a new series called I Wills That Change Your Life. And we're going to continue our journey through Colossians and see how there's kind of this shift that has happened in this book, that Paul has been talking about really heart issues and things that change our heart, like the supremacy of Jesus and what it means to be deep. And then also, how do we suffer and that we are children of God? And he makes this massive shift and he starts telling us how to live it out. And it goes through a lot of commands and this is what you should do. And so as we move into this series, I'm really excited to talk with you about some of these I wills that can actually change our life if we put them into practice. And where we get I wills from is we use these in Simple Church. Every Simple Church that typically meets, we ask this question every time: what are you going to do about this passage? And make an I will statement, because we want to apply God's word. So if you would pray with me real quick and let's dive in. God, we're so grateful for today. Thank you for what you're doing in this church. Thank you for each person and each soul that is here, God, that you are doing a work. God, I pray that today this would not be about me, but about you. In Jesus' name, amen. If you know me, I'm kind of a little bit of a competitive guy, but I hide it really well because I can be kind of that guy if I'm uber competitive. And so I've loved getting my kids into sports. So my son, Judah, he is 7 and he is in Little League right now. And they use the 38 mile an hour like machine pitch. So it's not T-ball. It's like you actually got to have a little bit of skill. And Judah's like the best on the team. But other than that, I'm not really that competitive and I don't pay attention to the score. Yes, I do. And we're getting into T-balls or into the fast pitch. Like Molly and I we go and buy those chairs. You know, you have the camping chairs, but these are like, you've gone full on sport parent when they have the shade over the top. I mean, as like not parent, I was like, you are a fool. But now as a parent, I'm like, that's pretty smart. That's very utilitarian right there. So we got our shade chairs, and all of a sudden we are getting creamed by another team. Like it's 9-0, and they're sending in runners, like I think illegally, and I'm like, this is messed up. And I'm like boiling a little bit. And Judah had led off and he had got on base and he started a hit streak all of a sudden. And we had the bases loaded, 2 outs. And one of our kids gets up and I'm like, oh no, he's not going to get a hit because he never gets a hit. I'm like, we're going to have 0 runs. I don't know what, but something happened and the ball actually hit the bat hit the ball, and the kid's like, I better run. And so he starts running, and literally the pitcher grabs it and throws it to first, and our kid hits the base, and the ball arrives. And who does the tie go to? Runner, of course. But I've been having my eye on this one guy, the coach of the other team. He was on first base, and he goes, out! And so I jump out of my chair, Pastor Jason, what? And I just stare the guy out, scared. I'm like, and after 3 seconds of awkwardness, he goes, safe. I'm like, that's right. And then he goes on to say later on, I hear him coaching up our team like, yeah, I was a catcher in college and you shouldn't do it that way. And I'm like, oh, you were a catcher in college. Thank you. You were. Tell me more. I mean, I just kind of was, I'm just showing you who I am. This is who I am. And it was just like the world revolved around him. You ever met people like that? Here's the sad thing. I'm like that a lot. The world revolves around me. All of a sudden, when I think of my life, if you ask me, Jason, does the world revolve around you? I'd be like, no, it doesn't revolve around me. But if you knew my thoughts, and sometimes if you saw my actions, you would see that the world does revolve around me. I think of every time I prepare a message, every time I get ready to speak, I get so much nerves. And as I think through the message, I get so worried. I'm like, what will people think of me? What if I say something wrong? What if they think this, or what if they think that? And what I start doing is my worry makes it about me instead of the message and about what God might have. We do this in so many areas of life. I mean, I don't know what happened, but my subconscious even knows this is true. Like 2 nights ago, I had a dream that I was about ready to give this message, and it was like 5 minutes before, and I forgot to prep the message, one, so I didn't have, but I had notes somehow, and they were on little thin pieces of paper, and there were 40 of them. And I had them like this, and so I was practicing, and then they all fell on the ground. This is my dream, and I'm like, ah! And then for some reason, the person like Billy, it wasn't Billy, she's in the audience, I won't point her out, but she was up here as the host as a Girl Scout. I don't know why she was up here as a Girl Scout, but she was a Girl Scout. And then I was like, stall, I gotta find my notes. So I go to Molly and I'm like, give me the iPad, give me the notes. And I get up and I'm just frantic. And my subconscious must know that I care so much about what you guys think. And I make it about me. But then life, it's so easy to make it about us. So our I will statement that will change our life, that I want us to see today is this. It's that I will not make it about me, but about him. I will not make it about me. I will make it about Jesus. It's just a thing in our world, and it continues to grow and grow and grow that we care more about me. Did you know in the 1950s, teenagers were asked, do you consider yourself very important? 12% of people said, I am very important. In 2013, this is the latest study I could find, when teens were asked, are you very important? 80% said, yes, I am very important. 96% of people in our world believe they will do something great. I'm not saying you're not important. I'm not saying you'll not do something great. 4% of you could do something great. The other 96% maybe think we're too highly of ourselves. The most desired job for an 18-year-old, do you know what it is? YouTuber. What does the word say? You. It's about you. And so it's like, I want to do a job where it's about me. And we're all this. This is not young people. This is a human problem. Just take, for instance, whenever you're in a conversation and they're going on and on and on, you start losing interest. And what do you start thinking about? What you will say next. It's just a human problem. We all think about ourselves, and most of us would not believe the world revolves around us, but our actions and our thoughts move us in that direction. Our human nature is to make it about us. And here's what I've found, is that human nature can be exactly how our spiritual nature is. That we all know like, oh yeah, vanity, that's wrong. We shouldn't make it about us. But we bring that into our spiritual lives, where our spiritual lives start revolving around us and not Jesus. And today I want to share with you from Colossians how they were having their little earth, their little world revolve around them. I went to Hobby Lobby yesterday and made my kids do a craft so that I could have these. So the sun makes up 99.8% of our solar system. I was talking to Bernard on keys. He works alongside NASA, and he goes, that is not to scale. I'm like, okay, well, thank you. This is 1,000,000 times bigger than this. I just couldn't hold it in my hand. So the sun, and for the longest time, we never knew how the sun and the earth work together, but we know the sun is the center of our solar system. And what does the earth do? It revolves around the sun. The sun is the center. But so many of us, we look at this, our little tiny dot there, and we exchange that, and we put ourselves at the center of our universe. And we go, everything revolves around us. And spiritually, we do this too. It should be about Jesus. It should be about the Son. Everything's centered around Jesus. If you want to know what we believe, it's all about Jesus. It's all about Jesus. Jesus should be the center. Yet so easily, and we don't do this on purpose, we make even following Jesus where we're the center, and we go, well, Jesus, what can you do for me? It's about me. You circle around me. You revolve around me. Happy Sunday. So let's jump in. In Colossians, we're going to look through the 3 ways that all of a sudden they started making their spiritual lives, not just their lives, their spiritual lives about them and not Jesus. And we tend to do the same thing. So the first way that I want to show you today, how we make our spiritual lives about us instead of Jesus, is we do this through our religious environments. Our religious environments. In Colossians 2:16, this is where we're going to pick up. It says, therefore, this is Paul talking to the Colossians, therefore, don't let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are shadows of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. It's interesting. Paul jumps in and he goes, therefore, do not let anyone judge you. That word judge actually means to condemn. It's condemnation. That's kind of from the pit of hell is to condemn. And it says, don't let anyone condemn you for what you eat or drink or what festivals you practice. See, and this time with the Colossians, Paul sees there's a ton of religious traditions that are passed down from their Jewish laws, from generation to generation, from food laws to sacrificial laws, and more and more and more and more laws. And Paul goes, don't let anyone judge you for that. But it's interesting that he says, don't let anyone judge you. Because can you control if someone judges you? No. So why does he say, don't let anyone judge you? You can't control that. He says that for two reasons. Because he knows people are actually judging them. It's like, oh yeah, people are judging you. So don't let them judge you. Don't let them condemn you. A lot of times judgment, speculation, he knows they're judging this church. And then secondly, he knows that judgment is affecting the Colossians' heart and then affecting their behavior. Because it's influencing, it's impacting them. And so Paul's going, don't allow this. And Jesus, I love Jesus because he was always for the sinner, the messed up person like me. And he always opposed who? The Pharisee, the person that had it all together, that had all the laws, that was a religious person. And Jesus was opposed to the Pharisee because they loved to make self-imposed laws that made them more holy, more closer to God. Their religious environments were holding them back. And they were pushing them. They were judging them. They were saying, you still should hold this festival or this celebration. The people that were following Jesus had left some of the Jewish ways, and they were no longer Sabbathing on Saturday, but on Sunday. And that doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but it was a massive deal. People were very frustrated with this. And Paul's going, don't allow people to judge you for these things. They are a shadow, a skia. It's just an image of this object it's just the image that represents this form. And when they go, it kind of shows some of God, but it's just the shadow. It's not reality. The reality is in Jesus. It's in the Son. You got to focus on Jesus. You got to make him the number one thing, not these other religious traditions. See, our religious traditions shape us. Paul was watching people compare their religious traditions and their environments and go, ours are better than yours. And then they start judging and condemning. And then all of a sudden, what happens is it becomes about them instead of Jesus. For us, our religious environments shape us. I did it just a second ago. I go, hey, would you pray with me? What did everybody do? I never said bow your heads. Why'd you bow your head? Jesus didn't tell you bow your head, close your eyes, put your hands together. Why do we do it? I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I do it. It's more just the environment we grew up in. It's we've been around. And when we go, okay, if this is the only way to pray, we might be condemning others because it's on tradition, not us. So I want to talk about how this plays out in our world. And I think one of the reasons I've been a little worried is I'm going to step in some potential landmines because I'm going to talk about our traditions. So go ahead and judge me. All right. But I want to throw in a caveat. Here's what I am not saying. I'm not saying this. Get rid of all practices. Get rid of all tradition. Get rid of obedience. Get rid of orthodoxy. That is not what I'm saying. So don't take my words. And I'm not saying this. You can't have preferences. You can have preferences. What I am wanting to tell you today is you have to be very cautious when any religious environment, spiritual experience, or external action that centers around you and not Jesus. Here's where I've experienced just religious environments. People have tons of opinions on music in church. It's like, hey, can we play some more Chris Tomlin up there, some hymns? Or like, I really like new worship. And there was nowhere in the Bible that said, thou shalt listen to Chris Tomlin. He's great, but there is no command. When we take it about our preferences and not Jesus and we judge other things, we start condemning people and making it about us. Another area is baptism. Tons of people have opinions on baptism. And we grew up in our environments. Maybe you grew up Catholic. Maybe you grew up unchurched. Maybe wherever you grew up, you probably were shaped by your environment about baptism. And it might be, well, okay, to be baptized, I got to be in a church building with a pastor. Or okay, it's okay if infants are baptized, or maybe you think it saves you, or you need to be a fully obedient follower of Jesus to be baptized, which no one will ever get baptized because no one's ever fully obedient. But you might believe that. See, our religious environments shape us, and the question we should be asking is not, what does my religious environment teach me? It's, what does Jesus say about it? How does Jesus shape it? How does it revolve around Jesus and not me? All right, another one. You guys with me? All right, good. Alcohol. There, you got tons of opinions when it comes to alcohol. If I were to poll people like, should Christians drink alcohol or not drink alcohol, you'd have a huge spectrum. And this was really in Paul's time. People were judging what they were eating and drinking. And so there might be people that go, I think we should be about moderation. I think we should be about abstinence. We know what the Bible might teach, that we're not to get drunk. But what's the line? Where are we supposed to be? And most of our environments have shaped us, or our backgrounds. If you come from a addictive family, I was hanging out with a guy and he was sharing with me he doesn't drink because of the addiction in his family. And I was like, man, that is so great. Then I was meeting with another guy and he was drinking and telling me how liberating and how free it was. And you know what? Both are great. Both are shaped from their experiences. The issue happens is when we make it about us and we put everybody else in our situation. We all have different situations. But when we make it about the rules, it empties the power of Jesus. Sermon styles. In this series, people are like, oh, I love going verse by verse. And other people are like, this kind of stinks. Let's go back to like love hacks. That was way more fun. Which one's better? Guess what? Jesus did both. Jesus would randomly topically study and he would randomly go through a scripture. Like it was both. And so we can have preferences in these, but when we judge one another and we start going, oh, like I like this, it becomes a little bit about us. And then I'll hear people say, I didn't get anything out of that sermon. You ever heard anybody say anything? I didn't get anything out of that? Who's it about? It didn't hit me. What about everybody else in there? You know how hard it is to talk to everybody up here? It's hard to hit all of you. It's not about us, though. It's about Jesus. Maybe we should be asking, what did it do for God? What did it do for our community? Last one, and we'll move on, is just our own knowledge. I see a lot of people, they kind of get really into their experiences and then their tradition, and the tradition is know a lot about God. Know as much theology as you possibly can. And what they start doing is they make it about them versus the study of Jesus. When we say that something is necessary, that, okay, you have to read this much and know this much to deeply know Jesus and follow him, the danger is you compare to other people, because what about the woman in India that can't read? Is she less spiritual than you? She's laying her life down. She has her friends and her family members dying of COVID, and she's sharing the gospel, loving them, but she has not read any of your theology books. Who's it about? I'm not saying anything's bad with theology. I love a good doctrinal study, but if it's about that and not about Jesus, it can become very, very dangerous. I lied, one more. Simple Church. I've seen this in Simple Church where we ask these questions. Simple Church is for you, but it's not about you. It's for you, but it's not about you. We ask, what are you grateful for? It's a question about you. What are you stressed out about? What's this verse say about people? How can you apply this in your life? And I've seen, and this is just human nature. We all can answer those really easily because it's about us. Well, it's about us. But when I ask the question, what's this say about God? People are like, I don't know. Oh, who should you share your faith with this week? I'm not answering that one. Why? It's just we've been bred and it's our nature to really struggle with making it about Jesus and not about us. What Paul goes on to say the remedy to this is, he goes, your religious environments, the way you grew up, the traditions, the things you have, they're a shadow. There's good in all of it. We have religious environments around us, but the reality must be Jesus. We must focus our attention on him. We must worship him. We must ask, what does he say in the scriptures, and be careful not to manipulate his words for our environments. We must make the world revolve around him. Because we have an environment of worship. We have a particular way of doing things. That doesn't make it better, right, wrong, but we have environments, but we have to continually ask, are these our preferences? And not judge others based on their preferences. We just need to ask, does it align with Jesus and his word? Because most of the traditions we've grown up with are not global Christianity. We have a really skewed view because we live in America. It's not global Christianity. Jesus cares deeply for you, though. He loves you. He died for you. This is not about self-hatred or destroying yourselves or beating yourselves up. The question we just want to keep asking is our lives centered around him or ourselves? Here's a couple steps I want to invite you to take this week that have been really good for me, taking my eyes, because this has been such a convicting message to walk through, because I go, oh man, I do this so much. I make it about me. I started praying the Psalms. So open up the Psalms and just start reading through it, and then I'll pray the prayers in there. And what all of a sudden I read is, I don't like it a lot of times because it doesn't focus about me. It focuses about God. And as I pray it, though, I have this connection with God maybe greater than I've had before, when it's only about my prayer request, what I want him to do. And I really find out who he is. And then the other thing I want to encourage you is just be careful not to make your preferences absolute truth. Make sure that your preferences, and then how you judge people, because when you judge, it starts to make it about you. All right, that's my longest point. So I have 2 other points. Don't worry, they're not that long. Stop judging me. It's not that long. Second point, the second way that we tend to make our spiritual lives about us and not Jesus is just our spiritual experiences, things that we've experienced spiritually. He goes on to say in Colossians, he goes, do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. Such a person also goes into great detail about what they've seen. They're puffed up with idle notions by their unspiritual mind. They have lost connection with the head, from whom the whole body, supported and held together by its ligaments and sinews, grows as God has called it to grow. What's happening in Paul's time here is that there are people that are trying to show how humble they are, how spiritual they are, their experiences, what God's done in their life, and they're going, look at me, puffed up, look what God's done in my life. And they start going, oh, have special knowledge. Jesus has talked to me in a special way, and that following them has a special spiritual experience. In that word, it says, don't let anyone who delights in false humility or worship of angels disqualify you. That word disqualify is where we get the word umpire from. So an umpire, they're uber trained. Like if you're an MLB umpire, you are very trained and you are very precise. And that window is not very big to see 100-mile-an-hour fastball. And you have to know exactly to judge if it is a ball or a strike. Who's the umpire? Jesus. Jesus should be the umpire going, that's in the lane, that's out of the lane. What we tend to do is we want to make ourselves the umpire and go, ball. Okay, I like that one. That's a strike. Because don't allow anyone to do that. You should not do that. Don't be the umpire. Allow Jesus to be the umpire. And we do this a lot when we have spiritual experiences. Here's some ways I've seen this play out for people in our day and age. I hear people say all the time, I experience God like this. There's nothing wrong with this, by the way. You can experience God in different ways. People go, I experience God when I'm on a run. I experience God when I'm in the mountains. 10-inch plus POW. Oh, I experience God. Like there's this amazing, but your faith can't be centered on those things. It's great to experience those things, but it can't be centered on those things because, in any relationship, you got to learn how to connect with the person. When I've learned to connect with my wife, Molly, I have to go, okay, I need to know how I like to connect. Like I like to go to sporting events, watch sports, go fishing. But if all I do is make it about my experience, it's pretty selfish and we don't have a real relationship. I need to think about her experience. So I need to ask the question, what does God want from me? Do you ask, what does God want? Do you know what the Bible says as far as what experiences he has for you and he wants for you? Do you know? The other spiritual experience that I hear people fight with, especially when they're seeking out Jesus, they go, I don't know if this can be in total truth. I don't know if Jesus is it. To experience God, to like really know God, like can Jesus be it? Like it seems too simple and it seems too narrow and it seems like how can the Bible be authoritative? And it's like I just can't figure it out. And since the moment Jesus died on the cross, people have not wanted to accept the gospel because it's not about our works, but it's about his work. We don't want to accept it because we didn't do anything for it, and if we lose control. It's not about us, though. If your life and your world doesn't hinge on Jesus, what does it hinge on? I've seen spiritual experiences in your own faith journey or your personal story of how you came to faith, where you have this experience of God, what God did in your life. And it's great, and we all have that. But there's like those people out there that you're like, you love their story, but you kind of hate them a little bit. You're like, okay, you're a crack dealer, and then Jesus rescued you, and then now you're a multimillionaire, you give all around the world, oh my gosh. And I'm like, my story's like, I came to faith, I grew up around church, and I was really bad. I lied a couple times. There was one time I got really mad at my parents and they turned around and I flipped them off. They didn't see it. I wanted them to see it, but they didn't see it, but it was bad. It was bad. And I'm like, but what I'm doing all of a sudden is like, why can't I have that guy's story? Why do I have my story? And when we start comparing our experiences back and forth, Jesus saved us both. And the power of the gospel is Jesus, not my story. Your story is great. It has an impact on people. You should use your story. But when it becomes all centered around you, it loses its power. The remedy for our spiritual experience is that Jesus just must be the head. That's what this passage says. It can puff you up. It puffs people up when they think their spiritual experiences are trumping others. And it makes us prideful. And then it leads us to idle notions, and it says that we've lost connection with the head. It's like we look somewhat like Jesus, but we don't have the mind of Jesus. We have to make Jesus the head of everything we do. How I want to encourage you to do that is just by worshiping him. By worshiping him. When we make our worship about Jesus and him more than what we can get out of it, it all of a sudden puts Jesus as the head. Here in a few minutes, we're going to take a moment and we're going to worship God, and we're going to try to not make it about you or me. We're going to try to make it about him, and when we worship him, it makes him the head. The last thing that we tend to do to make our spiritual lives about us and not Jesus is just our external actions. Our external actions, how other people perceive us. Paul goes on to say, since you died with Christ to the elemental spiritual forces of this world, why as though you still belong to the world? Do you submit to its rules? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These are rules which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use and are based on merely human commands and teaching. Paul is going, there's this elementary thoughts that the world has, and there's these forces, and you go back to your old way of thinking, these external behaviors and all the things that are destined to perish. And a lot of times we do things because other people are watching, not because it's actually in our heart. Didn't get any response from that, but it's true. We do things, I like to call it spiritual signaling. You've heard of virtue signaling? We love spiritual signaling. It's like, oh, they're in the room. I'm blessed today, brother. Like, when did you ever say blessed and brother? Like, why are you saying that? Like, who are you trying to prove? But we tend to prove through our external actions how spiritual we are. Jesus had something to say about this in Matthew 15. He says to the Pharisees who were doing this all the time, he says, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach, then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. What really matters in our lives is not what we do externally, what we put in, it's what comes out of our heart, of our soul, of who we are. We care a ton about what people think of us. We start judging even our spiritual disciplines about what they do for us, not about what they do for God. I've seen this in my prayer life, in the time I read my Bible. I also see it in sharing my faith. I know that Jesus, I know a lot of people are like, hey, I'm not an evangelist. Like that's not my gifting. But we're still called to reach and love and share the gospel with people. And people are like, I can't do it, Jason. What will people think? Or I don't have the words to say. I can't. Is it about you? Is it about me? No, it's about Jesus. And ultimately, I've shared the gospel terribly with words that were very foolishly, but I somehow brought up Jesus. And you know what happened? They were interested and came to faith because the gospel isn't about me and how well I can explain it anyway. The remedy for these actions, external actions, of what other people think about us, is what does Jesus say about you? Ron shared with us last week how Jesus says you're his child, you're loved. He cares so deeply about you. But what does he say about us? Not what do others say about us. It's not about what other people think. It's about what Jesus thinks. And in Galatians, it says this: am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. You can either please people or you can be a servant of Jesus. Which one's going to be your center? And Paul wraps it up, and as I wrap it up, he wraps all these thoughts with this thing in verse 23. He says, such regulations, all of these things, your experiences, your environments, your actions, they have an appearance of wisdom with their self-imposed worship. It's about you. Their false humility and their harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value in restraining sensual indulgence. So many people try to do things to stop sinning. And the things you're doing, as Paul is saying, it does not work, because what works is it must be through the heart. As I've grown closer to Jesus, even this week, I realize so much. I make following him about me way too often. I term my phrase, I'm calling myself this, I'm not calling you this, that I'm a little bit of a spiritual narcissist. I'm a spiritual narcissist. And narcissist comes from the Greek mythology Narcissus. Narcissus was a guy, he was born, and his mom, when he was born, was like, he is beautiful. He's so beautiful. And Apollo's counselor came in, and the prophet came in, and they predicted Narcissus would live a long life if one thing happened: he never saw himself. Then one day he's walking along, and he looks, and all of a sudden he sees a pool of water, and he sees his own reflection, and he gets so caught up in his own beauty that he just sits there and loves it so much and lives his life there, actually, and eventually dies. For us, we can get so stuck at looking at us and what God can do for us. And it's about me. And it's even about my own mistakes. God could never forgive that. Why did I make that decision? And you look back at yourself and you get your eyes so focused on yourself and what you think is best. But the key is what? To look up. To take your eyes off yourself and to put it on the Son. To put it on him. To make him Lord. Jesus said in Luke 9:24, whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it. When you lose your life in Jesus, you find it. So here's your I will that will change your life. Don't make it about you. Don't make it about you. And today I want to just give you an application for this week. When you go out in the sunshine, I love the sun right now, it's summer. When you go out and you feel the sun shining on you, even today, I just want you to take a moment and think, I'm this little tiny dot. God loves me, he knows me, but it's not about me. And you look up at the sun, don't look straight at it, but look at the sun, feel it, and go, God is shining down on me. I can feel him, I know him, and I'm not to make it about me, but I'm to make it about him, and that you would worship him. You would worship him. I want to invite Anna to come up, and what we're going to do right now is we're going to do something a little bit different. We're just going to ask God to make it about him and not us right now. I just asked her to sing a few words over us. And as she sings, I just want you to go, God, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about you.